Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. This is Scott Reisch. Thanks for watching Crime Talk. First on the docket, do you wonder what Chad and Lori Vallow's attorneys are doing this weekend? Second, Barry Morphew, the husband of missing Suzanne Morphew, speaks. 7 officers have been suspended in Rochester. An Indiana man confesses to a crime regarding his missing wife after his son tells a school counselor what he saw. R. Kelly's attacker is representing himself. Kyle Rittenhouse's defense fund is nearly $1 million. Our dumb criminal contestant of the day, and a recap of our contestants for the week so that you can decide the winner. Let's talk about it. Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reisch. Thanks for watching Crime Talk. First, if you haven't done so already, we'd ask that you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and leave us a comment below. Now, you can also hit that little bell so that you receive notifications of when we go live or put up new content. Let's get straight to the docket. Do you wonder what Chad and Lori's attorneys are going to be thinking about this weekend? I think I do. It's going to be the motion for joinder filed by the district attorney to bring their cases together for one trial. And the district attorney wants to consolidate them so that they're before one judge and that they can conduct one motions hearing versus separate motions hearings, where frankly, it's not good for the prosecution because one side gets a crack at the police officers and their investigators before the other one. Now, it makes complete sense, and I ultimately believe the court will grant this motion for joinder. The only way the court wouldn't grant this motion for joinder is if there are some admissions made by one party that are not admissible as it relates to another party. However, those can be done, and the judge can issue a limiting instruction before those statements come into evidence, and the court could tell the jury in that limiting instruction, you can only consider this statement as to one of the co-defendants, and you can only consider it for a limited purpose. The other way that the trials would be separate is if there was conflicting defenses. Now, the prosecutor obviously has an obligation to file this motion as early as possible, although he could have waited, had separate motions hearings, and then filed a motion for joinder for trial at a later date. But I like what the prosecutor did because he's literally trying to flush out the defense's position on what their defense will be. We've talked about before a general denial, which is, hey, I don't have any idea what the prosecution is claiming. I have no idea. I didn't do it. Or you can have conflicting defenses, which is say, he or she did it, and they would be pointing fingers at each other. Now, I can tell you from a criminal defense perspective, where I have done joint trials, it is never good when your guy is sitting there with 3 or 4 other people and all the evidences just keep coming in against your guy. It's kind of nice sitting there being the guy on the other end where they mention your client maybe once or twice. It's perfect because by the time you get to closing arguments, nobody can remember what they said about the guy where his name was only mentioned once or twice. That's where you want to be. But from a criminal defense attorney standpoint, you would rather be there by yourself and be able to point fingers at somebody else, and somebody else, the co-defendant, can't get up and bury you if they decide to testify or not. It's much better to have that empty defense chair. So Chad Daybell, he may say, I want a trial all to myself. And so the attorneys may have to actually be talking amongst themselves and trying to figure out, hey, maybe our trial defense is if Chad goes first, he points his fingers at Lori Vallow and the brother, Alex Cox, who's now deceased. And then when Lori Vallow gets a trial, she points her fingers at her brother and Chad Daybell and say, they must have done something. I have no idea. That's how the defense is going to try to figure out to keep these trials separate. And I'm sure these two would love to be together, and the world would be shocked if they're pointing their fingers at each other. But understand, they could only be pointing their fingers at each other just for the limited purpose of trial. And if they're found not guilty, guess what? They get to go live their life happily ever after. Although I still believe Chad Daybell is safer in custody as long as Lori Vallow is out there and he's still married to her. We'll wait and see, but I think their attorneys aren't going to have a long, enjoyable weekend because they're going to come up with a way to get around this motion for joinder. I'd be shocked if they said, let's have a joint trial. I don't think they'll want to confess the motion at all. Next on the docket, Barry Morphew, the husband of missing Suzanne Morphew, speaks. Now, Barry Morphew has kept a very low profile since his wife's disappearance. He's rarely spoken to the press, although he's doing a little bit more now, and he's put out a video. The brother of Suzanne Morphew has said that Barry Morphew is not cooperating with the police and has refused to take a polygraph. Now, obviously, Mr. Morphew doesn't have to do anything. However, in the court of public opinion, not the court opinion, he should probably appear as being the concerned husband and looking for his wife. He states that he loves her and he wants her to come home. He has 2 daughters with Suzanne Morphew. I'm sure the daughters want to know that their father is searching for their mother. Well, the story broke the other day that Barry Morphew was at a hotel literally just up the street here from the Crime Talk studios and catty corner to where we keep Crime Talk 1 over at the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. And he was there to do a construction job and that he had to leave immediately and that he called somebody down to do some work by the name of Jeff Puckett. Now, Jeff Puckett says, yeah, he called me. I came down. I showed up, and the first thing I noticed that there were a bunch of wet towels in the hotel room, and there was a very strong odor of chlorine, which seemed rather odd. Mr. Puckett also claims that it was very odd that there was no work that was done. Well, Barry Morphew has responded, and he says, you know what? Yeah, I did pay Jeff Puckett to come down. I told him to take care of the job, and apparently he didn't, which seems a little odd at this point. Barry Morphew also says, hey, there's security cameras around that entire place. If anything was weird going on, they would have captured it on video. Oh, and by the way, I too noticed a smell of chlorine in the hotel room. Now, you may recall that the hotel manager said that they no way use chlorine in any way to clean sheets or towels or anything of that nature. But Mr. Morphew said, I smelled that same chlorine smell, and it must have been for the COVID clean that was going on during that particular time. We will have to wait and see where this turns out. Obviously, without a body, it is very tough for charges to be filed. Bottom line, we've seen that before, and unfortunately, nothing has been found. Now, the police yesterday in Chaffee County, the sheriff actually, issued a statement saying that there is no one of interest in this particular case yet. Obviously, they're not trying to point fingers at Barry Morphew, and we are not doing that. We give everyone the presumption of innocence. And as we have all recalled, the case down in Houston, Texas, where Shane Carey was the fiance of Heidi Broussard, who went missing along with their newborn child. Well, it turned out that it wasn't Mr. Carey after a lot of people jumped the gun and said, oh, he looked nervous. He looked like he had beady little eyes on TV and he must be guilty. I just know how this is. Well, it turned out Shane Carey had absolutely nothing to do with the disappearance of Miss Broussard. And it turns out that it was, in fact, Megan Firamusco who literally was responsible for the crime. And I remember in that particular case, I said, hold on, something's just not right here. And let's give him the presumption of innocence. And a lot of people said, wow, I feel a little bad. I was accusing Mr. Shane Carey of doing bad things when he hadn't done it. So at this point, it's all suspicion around Mr. Boyer Morphew. That is not enough to charge somebody with a crime. And you also have to be very careful of what you say because you don't want to get sued. There's a lot of websites out there making some pretty bold statements, and they may want to be careful, and they may want to potentially consult an attorney about doing that type of bold allegation making. We here give Mr. Morphew, like we do everyone, the presumption of innocence unless and until they plead guilty or are found guilty by a jury. So a lot of people have hunches, a lot of people have gut feelings, but as we've said before, that's not probable cause. That's not enough to secure a conviction unanimously to a jury with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I think this is just one of those cases we're going to have to wait and see. And I mentioned a second ago that the Sheriff's Department issued a statement yesterday through their public information officer, and they basically said that they continue to work with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation as well as the Federal Bureau of Investigation regarding the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew. They've stated that they've had nearly 4 months, over 100 personnel, including air support, watercraft, underwater equipment, drones, canines, and other avenues to try and attempt to find Suzanne Morphew. They have set up a tip line that was established immediately, and hundreds of tips have been filed, and they have been followed up and investigated upon. There have apparently been hundreds of interviews conducted both in Colorado and out of state, and they continue to work this case vigorously. The sheriff's office notes that not one day has passed since Suzanne Morphew was reported missing that their investigative team has not been focused on Suzanne Morphew. Now, Suzanne Morphew's brother is trying to conduct volunteer search party as well as funds to support these search parties, and we'll see how that goes here in the near future. Next on the docket, yesterday we brought you the story of Daniel Prude. He was the man in Rochester, New York that was having a psychotic episode and ultimately died after police officers placed a mesh hood over his head, which is commonly referred to as a spit mask, so that he, Mr. Prude, would not continue to spit on the officers. Ultimately, Mr. Prude died, and this was some nearly 6 months ago. The autopsy revealed that Mr. Prude died of asphyxiation. It was ruled a homicide, and Mr. Prude also had in his system, which would probably explain some of the erratic behavior, i.e. running down the street naked, is that he had a PCP in his system. If anyone's ever known somebody or seen somebody on PCP, they can act very irrationally, and they can be a danger to themselves as well as to others. The police officers were not held accountable or suspended in any way during the ongoing investigation. Although after this story hit front page of just about every news organization across the country, the officers were suddenly placed on administrative leave. As I said yesterday, everything was fine until it hit the news media. The investigation is ongoing, as under New York law, the Attorney General has to conduct the investigation, so as the local officials don't have their hand in it in any way. Not necessarily a bad thing at all, but I am always flabbergasted by the amount of time it takes to conduct an investigation. We'll see if criminal charges will be forthcoming or if the situation will be termed, as we've said and asked you to comment on, was it awful but lawful, or was it truly unlawful and warranting of criminal charges? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Next on the docket, an Indiana man confesses to a crime regarding his missing wife, and his son tells the counselors what happened. That's right. 3 days after authorities arrested a man for killing his estranged wife, an Indiana man has confessed to the crime in open court and entered a guilty plea to 1 count of murder. According to police reports, Judson Hoover's 8-year-old son approached a counselor at his elementary school and described to the counselor that he watched his father kill his mother in the family's basement. Now, Judson Hoover is 50 years old, and he reported his 38-year-old wife, Rebecca Hoover, missing back on August 2nd, a day before he filed divorce paperwork. Obviously, after the boy made the statement to the school counselor, the school contacted the police. Investigators spoke with Hoover's son, who allegedly said that he saw his father attack his mother, and he described how he stomped her head about 20 times while wearing work boots. The child also described how Hoover punched the unresponsive mother while holding a set of keys in his hand as she laid on the ground. Judson Hoover was arrested on Monday as he tried to pick his son up from school. He went before the judge on Thursday and entered his guilty plea. According to arrest affidavits in the case, the police found traces of blood near the bottom of the basement steps. The affidavit also details prior allegations of domestic battery that show that Hoover had been charged with strangulation back in April. That has got to be one of the fastest pleas in a homicide case ever. That's not even enough time for the attorneys to get the plea paperwork, to do their proper investigation, and try to come up with a defense. However, that's always the defendant's right to plead guilty if, in fact, they want to. Now, the police, regardless of the guilty plea, still continued their investigation, and they had found that Hoover had rented a self-storage unit 2 days after reporting his wife missing. The surveillance footage showed Hoover moving what appears to be a body into that storage space. When the police executed the search warrant, they could smell a body decomposing once they were inside. Rebecca's remains were ultimately found in the storage unit in a 55-gallon drum. The autopsy showed that she had died from blunt force trauma to the head and abdomen, which was all supported by their son's account of how the mother was killed. Now, this child, this 8-year-old child, is definitely going to need a lot of support and therapy over the years for sure. Must have been something absolutely horrific to see your mother being beaten that way, ultimately resulting in her death. Let's take a quick recess after hearing those facts. Ladies and gentlemen, I've asked you to do this, and I wouldn't ask you if I didn't believe it to be true. Please go to CrimeTalkSearch.com so that you can sign up for a background subscription service. Now, when you sign up for this subscription service, you can search anyone in the United States completely anonymously. You can do as many searches as you want. And when you type in that name and you hit the return button, literally, while you wait, millions and millions of records are searched around the United States. The report that is generated will show you email addresses that are associated with the individual you're searching, telephone numbers that are associated with the person that you are searching, as well as their social media. You will get a complete history of possible hits as it relates to criminal history, including sex offender registration. You can search marital records, property records. You will have information regarding bankruptcies as well as civil judgments. In today's world, you simply can't take the chance of knowing with whom you are dealing. You must know. Information is power, and it gives you the opportunity to make good decisions. We've had lots of people contact us and said, "Hey, Scott, I signed up and I found out that an individual I was getting involved with had a criminal history." We had other individuals say, "I was going to do a business with somebody. I did a background search and found out that they had fraud in their background." Ladies and gentlemen, that small fee for a subscription literally could have saved these individuals their business and possibly even their lives. You can cancel at any time, but go to CrimeTalkSearch.com and sign up for a background subscription service today. You'll be absolutely happy and satisfied that you did. Next on the docket, let's meet Jeremiah Shane Farmer. That's right. Mr. Farmer is the man who has claimed to have attacked R. Kelly in jail. As you may recall, R. Kelly, while awaiting trial on his own matters, was assaulted by an inmate that entered his cell because the inmate was unhappy with a lockdown that was in place as a result of people outside protesting R. Kelly. Mr. Farmer has filed documents with the court saying that he's the one inmate that was pissed off and attacked R. Kelly in his jail cell. Now, he makes some pretty outlandish claims in these filings, although he's not been officially charged from what we can tell. Now, in the documents, he claims that the government made me attack Mr. Kelly, although Mr. Farmer doesn't explain why, but he says that he is doing this and he pulled it off in an attempt to shed light on government corruption. It's unclear exactly what corruption he's talking about, but he feels as though he has been done dirty by the justice system. The United States Attorney for the Northern District of Indiana confirms that Mr. Farmer is a Latin King gang member and that he was in fact convicted last year after a jury heard the evidence and reached their decision and concluded that he in fact beat 2 men to death with a hammer as part of a racketeering conspiracy. So, Mr. R. Kelly, if you take a look at Mr. Farmer here, he was probably scared to death of this guy beating him up. Because when you're in prison, nobody cares what your status is on the outside. We'll continue to follow Mr. Farmer's attempt to admit to the crimes, and since he's probably not going anywhere outside the Bureau of Prisons anytime soon, he's got nothing to lose. Next on the docket, remember Kyle Rittenhouse? He's the 17-year-old charged with several counts of murder and carrying an illegal weapon, according to the prosecutor, as it relates to multiple shootings that took place in Kenosha, Wisconsin. A lot of people obviously believe that Mr. Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty. Other people believe that he was acting in complete self-defense. You can take a look at the video on a link below that we've put down there, where we discuss this particular case and we walk through the charges and believe there were basically 2 incidents. One where it is alleged that Mr. Rittenhouse turned back and fired and hit somebody that, as far as we know, kind of a random individual. There's no evidence that that person actually assaulted or attacked Mr. Rittenhouse. However, we don't have all the facts. And I believe, based upon what we know at this point, that may be a little bit tougher to claim self-defense on because you can only claim self-defense as to the person who is the victim. The other shooting, which took place after Mr. Rittenhouse was running, tripped and fell, then was attacked by an individual with basically a kick. Then another individual came at him with a skateboard, and then another individual who was in fact armed and was shot but survived. Those have, I believe, much better claims of self-defense. Now, some of the other sundry of charges relating to a firearm, those are misdemeanors. Frankly, those are the least of Mr. Rittenhouse's concerns when he could be spending the rest of his life in prison. Well, guess what? He has a legal defense fund of nearly $1 million. A Give, Send, Go platform, which is a GoFundMe type of page, because GoFundMe dropped Mr. Rittenhouse's GoFundMe page. Well, that has about $390,000 to help for legal offenses. And then one of Rittenhouse's attorneys, Lynn Woods, who we also discussed, pretty heavy hitter, said that he has more than 11,000 people that have donated, which totals over $600,000. So he has nearly $1 million in a legal defense fund. That will help anybody put up a good fight. You can imagine the experts, the reconstructionists, the video, the doctors explaining the stress of a mob chasing you. There is going to be experts galore. Not condoning what this kid did. The courts will have to decide whether he acted in a just manner or a legal manner, or whether he acted illegally. But he certainly has a lot of money to come up with a lot of good support, a good defense, and a lot of experts. Next on the docket, let's take a quick recess. We've talked about this before, and it's back. That's right, the safety siren, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what exactly is this? This is a personal alarm, a safety device capable of creating a 120 decibel sound that attracts attention and scares away potential assailants. Now, to compare the sound, it is the same volume as a military jet taking off. It's simple to use. Now, instead of having a button that could easily be pressed by accident, the safety siren device utilizes an easy pull pin. And once pulled, that device emits its ear-piercing sound for up to 30 continuous minutes or until the pin is put back in and replaced. It can be reused over and over again, and it easily attaches to purses, keys, and backpacks. It's small enough to fit in your pocket. It packs a huge wallop. Bottom line, everyone needs one of these. Go to CrimeTalkOffers.com and get a safety siren. This alarm has been helping people across the country, and it's more than just a safety device for women or the elderly. Women can use this as a crime deterrent, protecting themselves from attackers. Kids are protected as they walk to school by keeping a safety siren on their backpacks. Seniors can alert neighbors and people around them in emergency situations such as a heart attack, falls, or injuries, or just about any situation you could possibly imagine. The police have recommended the safety siren, and it is the best on the market. Go to CrimeTalkOffers.com and get a safety siren today. Next on the docket, meet Bounty Cherami. That's right. He is 22 years old, and he was driving the other night. Now, we've all seen those temporary safety signs that go up that say, don't drink and drive, you're driving too fast, slow down, right? You know, the ones on the side of the road. Well, Mr. Cherami was apparently a little too intoxicated because he hit one of those temporary signs, and he hit it pretty darn hard. And guess what the message was? Guess what the message was on the board that he hit? Drive sober or get pulled over. Now, according to police, Mr. Cherami was in his car around 12:30 a.m., and Mr. Cherami's car sustained heavy front-end damage, according to the police deputies. And they say that the sign warning people about driving sober or get pulled over was in fact the victim of Mr. Cherami's car. According to Mr. Cherami, he was talking on the phone when he suddenly hit something, but he wasn't exactly sure what he in fact hit. But of course, the police officers arrived, smelled that odor of an unknown alcoholic beverage, observed that he was unsteady on his feet, swaying back and forth, couldn't focus, and of course, the deputies then asked for him to take roadside sobriety tests, which of course he failed, like many people do, to perform them as a sober person would. He ultimately took a breath test, and his alcohol content was twice the legal limit. Mr. Cherami's been charged with DUI and careless driving and has court later in September. Now, Mr. Cherami, you are a dumb criminal contestant of the day. And let me tell you, you have some competition this week. Now, before we recap the competition, what does the winner get? Is it fame? Is it fortune? No, it's better than that. It's Crime Talk merchandise. That's right. Mr. Cherami, if you are selected the dumb criminal contestant of the week, I will go to crimetalksearch.com, type in your name, get your address, and mail you a mug. That's right. No expense to you at all because, frankly, you've earned it. Now, let's do a quick recap of this week. Do you remember Rico Toro, the man who tried to take his family to Disneyland only to be disappointed? That's right. Mr. Toro took his family to Disneyland, was told that he had improper masks. They didn't meet the Disney guidelines. Mr. Toro then returned to his car, and most of the family had sufficient masks, but one child. Disney was having nothing to do with that. So Mr. Toro did the next obvious thing, and that was to assault the Disney manager. Next on Tuesday, and I have to admit, this contestant has got to be a front runner, Mr. Christopher Sale, who got the munchies late at night and decided to drive through the Taco Bell drive-through window completely naked, and then find ways to continue the conversation with the Taco Bell personnel. No, that's called indecent exposure, and it's not a good excuse when you say you were hungry and all your clothes were in the washer. Next, who could forget Madison Bryan? That's right. She was the woman whose boyfriend got pulled over for DUI. She was in the median. Officers were going to give her a ride over to the gas station to use the restroom, and she couldn't wait. She peed in front of the police officer, whereupon she promptly was arrested for the urination in public. And she needed a hit on her Juul vaping device for her anxiety and offered to perform various sexual acts on the officer to get her Juul pen. Unfortunately for her, the officer was a very happily married man. Oh, and by the way, it was on video from the camera in the car. Now, we also had Mr. Nicholas Mark, who applied for a job at a local pizzeria in Pennsylvania, whereupon he grabbed the tip jar containing some $220 on his way out. Now, obviously today, we've joined Mr. Jeremy. You all decide, leave me a comment below, who is our dumb criminal contestant of the week that deserves the cool Crime Talk merchandise. Let me know. That's all we have for today, but I want to remind you, we go live every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and you can go to ScottReisch.com as well. Sign up for our free newsletter that goes out every Thursday. It's free. Nobody ever gets anything free from a lawyer, so go sign up and we'll send you information that doesn't make the cut to make it here on Crime Talk every day. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.